Who has never asked themselves, why do bad things happen to good people? This doubt burns in the chest when life turns upside down and the ground disappears beneath our feet. Job's story begins right there, at the point where many would lose faith. A man of integrity, prosperity, surrounded by children and wealth, but who in the blink of an eye loses everything, and then some. But what makes this story so powerful isn't the suffering itself, it's Job's reaction to it. If you've ever faced days when everything seemed to fall apart, brace yourself. This journey goes beyond misfortunes and regrets. It touches on deep issues, integrity, purpose, divine justice. And it reveals an uncomfortable truth. True faith is tested in the fires of pain, not on sunny days. Job shows us that, even covered in ashes and wounds, it is still possible to lift our eyes and find meaning where there only seems to be silence. Maybe you're going through a season like this, of loss, of confusion, of sleepless nights and unanswered prayers. This video doesn't offer magical solutions, but it does carry something that can rekindle your hope, the testimony of someone who went through the furnace and came out the other side transformed. And more, with double the blessing. But be careful. This is not a story about a happy ending, but about transformation. About what happens to the soul when it chooses to trust even while bleeding. Ready to dive? So let's start from the beginning. Before any tragedy, Job was already known for something great, his prosperity. It wasn't just material wealth, it was influence, respect, stability. He had thousands of animals, many servants and 10 children who lived in harmony. But the most impressive thing is that, even with all this, Job did not settle. Every day, he offered sacrifices to God for his children, if they had sinned unintentionally. This shows that, for him, faith came before fortune. This attitude of Job teaches something essential. True success is not just in what we have, but in how much we care about what is invisible. There are people who, when everything is going well, forget to pray. Job did the opposite. He covered his children with prayer before he even knew if they needed it. It's like that mother who prays for her son every morning before he leaves the house, even when everything seems to be going well. This is living with purpose. Another thing that draws attention is the balance between goods and values. Job was rich, but he was not greedy. He was admired, but he was not proud. That makes all the difference. How many people do you know who have achieved a lot, but lost their peace in the process? Job is living proof that you can prosper without corrupting your character. And that is rare, both in his time and today. It's worth reflecting. If God blessed you with everything Job had, would your spirituality grow along with it? Job's integrity before the crisis is the foundation that will sustain his faith in the worst moment of his life. And we'll get there. But first, prepare yourself for the shock of the unexpected. Imagine waking up on an ordinary day, and when it gets dark, everything you love and built no longer exists. That's exactly what happened to Job. In a matter of hours, he lost his flocks to marauders, saw his servants killed, and most devastatingly, received the news that all of his children died at the same time. A strong wind blew down the house where they were gathered. It was pain on top of pain, as if the universe had turned against him. It's hard to imagine such an intense ordeal. Most of us despair over a single loss. Now think about facing them all together, without time to breathe. Job had no warning. There was no preparation. The calamity came like an avalanche, silent at first, but crushing in its impact. And here comes the key point. Even though he was shaken, he did not rebel against God. He tore his clothes, yes. He cried, of course. But still, he loved it. This is raw faith, without makeup. How many times do we find ourselves saying, "Why, God?" at the first sign of loss? Job did not ask this question right away. His first reaction was to fall to the ground and recognize that everything he had, first and foremost, belonged to God. This changes everything. Those who live with this understanding that they are only stewards of blessings suffer in a different way. Suffer with pain, but not with revolt. Suffer with tears, but not with resentment. But don't think he was made of iron. The pain reached him all over, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And even though he didn't understand why, he resisted the urge to blame God. Now comes an even tougher phase, when the wound that is inside begins to manifest itself on the outside, and even those who are next to us no longer help. After losing everything, Job still faces something that seems like the final blow, a severe physical illness. Painful wounds cover his body from head to toe. And he, such a respected man, now sits on a pile of ash, scraping his wounds with a shard of pottery. The image is shocking, a symbol of misery and humiliation. And the worst, he still hears from his own wife, "Curse your God and die." When even those who walk beside you give up, the suffering doubles. This point in the story reveals something profound to us. Suffering is not limited to what we have lost. It multiplies when we are judged by our pain. Job no longer has property, children, or health. And now, emotional loneliness. His answer, however, is firm and embarrassing. Shall we receive good from God and not also evil? He does not deny the pain, but he refuses to offend God with his lips. This is integrity in the flesh. Have you ever experienced moments when you felt your body fail, your soul scream, and you even had to deal with criticism or a lack of empathy? Job shows that even in these dark days, there is a place of inner resistance. True faith does not ignore pain, but it refuses to let it be the last word. And more, it teaches us that silence can be a form of worship. Job is there, in silence, living with open wounds, outside and inside. Grief is heavy, and physical pain gives no respite. But still, he does not abandon God. This leads us to an uncomfortable question. Does our faith survive when everything falls apart? And it is in this scenario of ruin that three decisive figures arrive: the friends. Job's three friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, arrived from afar when they heard about the tragedy. When they see him from afar, they almost don't recognize him. The image of that man, once prosperous, now covered in wounds and pain, shakes them deeply. They cry, tear their clothes, and sit with him on the floor. For 7 days and 7 nights, no one says a single word. Sometimes the best consolation is silence. This moment is powerful. Before they judged, criticized, or tried to explain what happened, they were simply present. And that is rare. In times of suffering, many walk away. Others even appear, but with empty speeches. These 7 days reveal a real kind of empathy, even if, later on, they make a big mistake. Because, at the beginning, they get something fundamental right. Suffering sometimes just needs company, not advice. How many times have you wanted to comfort someone and didn't know what to say? The truth is that we don't always need to say something. The silent embrace, the constant presence, the "I'm here" without promising solutions, that can save a soul in pieces. Job, even without words, felt that he was not completely alone. And that held some of the weight. But, as we will see, this silence would not last long. Job's pain was about to boil over, and with it would come an outburst that would pave the way for long discussions. Friends, who started out as support, would soon become a source of more pain. Because those who approach to console are not always able to withstand the depth of other people's suffering. And when the pain is too much, even the day of birth becomes the target of a curse. After days of silence, Job explodes, not against God, but against existence itself. He curses the day of his birth, wishing he had never come into the world. He does not ask for death as an escape, but he regrets having lived to see so much suffering. It's a cry from the soul, a pain so deep that it transforms life into weight. Job doesn't understand why the wretched are still alive, and his questioning isn't blasphemy, it's sincere despair. Here, Job is not denying his faith. He is immersed in raw, unfiltered, human anguish. And this is also part of the spiritual journey. How many of us have gone through moments like this, when it seems that God has fallen silent, that nothing makes sense, and that suffering has become the only language spoken that day? In these moments, even the most encouraging verses seem distant. Job verbalizes what many only have the courage to think. Job's speech is a mirror for those who are tired of pretending to be strong. He throws the pain on the table. Question, cry, lament. And all this before God. This is important. He doesn't turn his back. He takes his anguish to the one who, even in silence, is still his God. This teaches us that true faith allows space to mourn. It's not a sin to cry. It is not weakness to scream. Sincere lament is also a form of prayer. But not everyone can deal with this kind of vulnerability. Job's friends begin to get upset. And what was empathy turns into judgment. They start looking for culprits. And as many do to this day, they decide that if something went wrong, the blame can only lie with those who suffer. The empathy of Job's friends doesn't last long. When the silence ends, words begin to hurt. Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar adopt a discourse that seems logical, but is cruel. If Job is suffering so much, it is because he has certainly sinned. According to them, God is too fair to allow such pain without reason. They interpret the ordeal as punishment, a conclusion that, unfortunately, still resonates today. This "those who suffer make a mistake" mentality is dangerous. It turns pain into a sentence and the sufferer into a defendant. Job hears, already fragile, accusations that hurt more than his physical wounds. They tell him to repent, confess what he hides. But he knows there is no hidden sin. And that makes him even more desperate. Because, if not even your friends believe in your integrity, who will? Loneliness deepens. How many times have you seen someone judged for what they are going through? A financial crisis becomes a lack of faith. An illness is seen as a hidden sin. This distorted logic tries to explain the inexplicable, but it only keeps people away from grace. Job's friends tried to defend God's justice, but they ended up distorting his mercy. And worse, they put words in God's mouth that he never said. This point in the story shows that words, even spoken with good intentions, can destroy. Sometimes, it's better to remain silent than to try to justify someone else's pain with shallow theology. Job, cornered and misunderstood, decides to defend himself. And when he opens his mouth, the tone changes. Now, he wants to talk to God directly. Job finally decides to stand up, not physically, but with words. He firmly rejects his friends' accusations. He maintains his integrity and refuses to admit a sin he did not commit just to please others. Instead, Job wants something bold, to present his case before God. He wants a fair trial, a chance to reason with the Creator himself. Is it courage or despair? Maybe both. But most of all, it is faith. It is at this point that the story of Job becomes a lesson in authenticity. He doesn't hide behind ready-made phrases. Don't settle for shallow explanations. He wants to understand, and demands an answer. This teaches us that questioning God is not the same as rejecting him. Job protests, yes, but he protests because he believes that God is just. It's the pain that screams for meaning. And this shows a living faith, which breathes even when there is no air. He also confronts his friends firmly. He says they speak lies in the name of God, and that is serious. How many times do we see people saying, "God showed me," just to justify a personal opinion? Job does not tolerate this kind of empty spirituality. And the most beautiful thing is that, even in the midst of pain, he continues to search for truth. He doesn't want cheap consolation, he wants clarity. Want justice. Want God. And that desire moves you closer to the answer that will come. Because, although it seems that the sky is silent, the sincere cry never goes without echo. Job plants questions, but it is God who will reap with an answer that none of them expected. And when it comes, it will come with the force of a storm. After long chapters of silence, which seem eternal, God finally responds. But not in the way everyone expected. It offers no explanations, no blame, no details on the why of so much suffering. Instead, he speaks with power, from the midst of a whirlwind. And he responds with questions that put everything into perspective. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? God's answer is not an explanation, it is a revelation. God shows Job, and us, that there is an entire universe functioning under divine wisdom, a plan far greater than any human being can comprehend. It is not a shut up, but an invitation to humility. Job, upon hearing those words, realizes something profound. He does not need to understand everything to continue trusting. True faith is trusting even when the script doesn't make sense. This divine response, wrapped in majesty and mystery, changes the game. Job does not receive an explanation for his suffering, but he does receive something more valuable, a new vision of who God is. And this transforms the way he sees himself, the world, and even his pain. The subtle arrogance that grew in his protests melts away in the face of the greatness of the Creator. Job surrenders, not out of tiredness, but out of revelation. Maybe you are waiting for God to explain something in your life. But what if, instead, He wants to show you who He is? Sometimes what we need is not a response, but a presence. And that's what Job received, a divine visit in the midst of chaos. And the story is not over yet, because now comes the time for restitution. After the encounter with God, something unexpected happens. The focus shifts. Now Job's friends are at the center of the correction. God harshly rebukes them. "You have not spoken what is right about me, as my servant Job did." The turnaround is clear. Those who accused are now on trial. And the only way they will receive forgiveness is if Job prays for them. The wounded man becomes an intercessor. How ironic, or rather, how funny. Job, who could hold a grudge, chooses to forgive. Pray for your friends, even after everything you've heard. And in that gesture, humble, silent, and powerful, something moves in the sky. God accepts prayer. And soon after, the restoration begins. Job receives twice as much as he had before: flocks, land, wealth. But more than goods, he receives what he had lost and could not be bought: peace. And a new family. 10 children again. How to explain this? Only God. The most beautiful part of this restitution is that it comes after repentance and reconciliation. It's not just a material blessing, it's a complete healing, physical, emotional, spiritual, and relational. Job lives another 140 years, sees up to the 4th generation of his descendants, and dies in peace. Suffering was not the end. It was the middle. The process that revealed the depth of faith, the strength of humility, and the power of redemption. And here's a question. Are we prepared to forgive those who hurt us, even without having all the answers? Job shows us that there is a divine purpose even in the darkest suffering. And that, if we stand firm, even though we are bleeding, the last chapter will be written by God, and He writes with redemption. And now, what does this story tell you? Maybe you are in the pain chapter, surrounded by unanswered questions. Or maybe you are in the silent phase, waiting for God to say something. The truth is that we all, at some point, go through this living book called suffering. But Job reminds us that no tear is wasted, and that, yes, divine justice has its time, even when it seems late. What do you do when everything falls apart? Do you curse or worship? Job had plenty of reasons to give up, but he chose to continue. Not because I understood everything, but because I trusted in the one who was above everything. And you, have you trusted even without understanding? What kind of faith has sustained your difficult days? If this journey spoke to you, don't let it die here. Share with someone who also needs to find purpose in the midst of pain. Subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, and stay with us, because we still have a lot to discover in biblical stories that truly transform lives. Here, each video is a step closer to hope.